This check. It doesn't feel right. The paper's off. Honestly, are you certain this is genuine? The words, sharp and devoid of any greeting, sliced through the bank's quiet hum. They came from a young teller, her eyes narrowed with suspicion, directed at a 78-year-old Marine veteran. He'd waited years, navigating a labyrinth of bureaucracy, for this U.S. Treasury check. He offered no argument, no raised voice. He simply watched, a lifetime of discipline holding him steady, as she fed his hard-won due into the shredder without a second thought. 5 minutes later, the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury himself walked through those same bank doors. What unfolded next brought the entire establishment to a stunned, pin-drop silence. Welcome to Unbreakable Spirit, where we share stories of resilience that inspire and uplift. Let's discover the truth behind that moment. Brookdale, Missouri, was a town that savored its unhurried pace. Sunrise was an event, not a race. Traffic lights blinked leisurely long past midnight, and the same familiar pickup trucks made their Saturday rounds downtown. It was a place where neighbors still waved from across the street, the local diner shuttered by 3, and a man like Raymond Hull could exist in quiet routine, almost unseen yet ever present. At 78, Hull resided in a modest second-floor apartment above a disused barber shop. No elevator, just a creaking staircase climbed with muscle memory forged over years. His needs were simple: a stovetop kettle, a radio that faithfully delivered gospel hymns and weather forecasts, a shoebox of unopened letters, relics of a past he kept folded away. And, as of last week, an envelope from the United States Treasury. Inside lay the check. Not just paper and ink, but the culmination of a decade-long battle against red tape, bureaucratic indifference, and echoing silence. It was retroactive disability compensation from the Department of Veterans Affairs, payment for wounds that never truly mended. Not the kind you bandage, but the kind that settles deep in your bones, a constant, quiet ache. The sum was significant, enough to finally fix the roof that wept with every autumn rain, perhaps even enough for a trip to Oregon to see his daughter, if his aging knees would permit. Hull hadn't smiled upon opening it. He'd simply stared, the paper a testament in his hand. Then, with practiced neatness, he folded it, secured it in his jacket pocket, and the next morning, set out with the same focused determination he'd once applied to loading supply trucks in Denham. 2 blocks, a right at the courthouse, and into the Cedar River Credit Union, his bank for nearly 4 decades. The familiar scent of old carpet and anticipation hung in the air, under the hum of fluorescent lights. He took a number, sat, and waited. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating his worn boots and the soft brim of his plain tan cap. Hull never wore military insignia. His service was etched in his posture, not displayed on his attire. When his number was called, he rose with unhurried grace. "Good morning," he stated, his voice steady. "I'd like to deposit this check." The teller, Lindsay Foster, barely out of her teens, with bright eyes, manicured nails, and a smile that felt more practiced than genuine, took the check. Her gaze flickered over it. An eyebrow twitched. She flipped it, held it to the light, ran it under a small UV scanner. Her fingers paused over her keyboard. "This is a substantial amount," she observed, her voice carefully neutral. Hull nodded once. "From the Treasury. Disability compensation. Approved 2 months back." Lindsay didn't reply, her fingers flying across the keyboard, eyes darting between screens. A flicker of confusion, then suspicion, hardened her expression. "The paper stock feels unusual," she murmured. "And the routing number. It's not a standard format we see. It's government issued," Hull replied, his voice unwavering. "Came directly from the VA." She continued typing, not meeting his gaze. "Sir," she said, her tone now clipped, "do you have other forms of verification?" Hull calmly produced his VA identification, his Missouri driver's license, and the official award letter from the Treasury Department. He laid them on the counter. Facts, not pleas. Lindsay glanced at them, a cursory inspection, then leaned back, lips pursed. Bank policy, she declared, requires us to flag instruments that raise red flags. Her hand reached for the phone, then, in a startling deviation from protocol, veered towards the shredder. No need to escalate this, she muttered, almost to herself. If it's not valid, we can't process it. Hull blinked, his composure momentarily shaken. What are you doing? I'm sorry, sir. This check presents too many irregularities. You haven't verified anything, he stated, a hint of steel in his quiet tone. I've seen enough, she retorted, a mix of misguided certainty and unease in her voice. And with that, she fed the check into the machine. The shredder whirred, and in seconds, his validation, his long-awaited due, became confetti. A heavy silence descended, the kind that feels out of place in the mundane world of banking, more suited to the aftermath of a battle. Raymond Hull didn't yell. He didn't pound the counter. He stood, still as a statue, his eyes fixed on the shredder's unforgiving maw, where a piece of his life, his struggle, had just been unceremoniously obliterated. That was a United States Treasury check, he said at last, his voice low but resonant. It was valid and irreplaceable. Lindsay crossed her arms. If you believe so, sir, I suggest you contact the issuer. They can reissue it. A dismissive shrug. If they don't, that's not my department. The queue behind Hull had fallen silent. Some averted their gaze, suddenly engrossed by their phones. Others stared at the floor. Not a single voice spoke in his defense. What happened to Raymond Hull wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet act of erasure, easily missed. But not by everyone. Outside, the wind stirred the flag Hull had saluted as a young man, nursing a broken ankle, his rifle jammed in the monsoon rains. He turned, pushed open the door, and stepped into the sunlight, the weight of the shredded check a fresh ache in his chest. His steps, once so firm, faltered ever so slightly. What Lindsay Foster, what no one in that bank lobby knew, was that the man they had just dismissed was far from finished. Raymond Hull didn't storm out. He didn't shout. He walked, shoulders squared, hands deep in his coat pockets, a profound pain carefully concealed. Across the street, a small public park offered a bench, a solitary maple shedding its autumn leaves, and a clear view of the Cedar River Credit Union. He crossed, with the deliberate calm that only age and combat can bestow, sat down, and drew a deep breath. From his pocket, he retrieved a worn flip phone, held together by tenacity and tape. He had few numbers saved. He needed few. One entry read simply, JC. He pressed call. It rang 3 times. Colton, a voice answered. James, it's me. Ray, Hull said. A pause, then the voice sharpened. Ray? What's wrong? Raymond took a measured breath. They shredded it. Silence. Then, incredulously. They what? The Treasury check. VA disability. She ran it through a shredder. No real questions, no verification. Just suspicion and bank policy. Another pause, then Colton's voice dropped, becoming cold, lethal. A teller destroyed a United States Treasury instrument? That's precisely what I'm telling you. Where are you, Ray? Outside the branch. Cedar River Credit Union, Brookdale. I'll handle it, Colton said, his voice a promise of swift action. Stay put. The line went dead. Raymond closed the phone. He waited. Inside the bank, Lindsay Foster tried to project professionalism, but a tremor ran through her. Her manager, Gerald Price, now hovered. You did what? I shredded it, she defended. It didn't pass verification. The routing number, the watermark. Policy states you call me. You escalate, Gerald hissed, rubbing his temples. Lindsay, a Treasury check. It could have been counterfeit. Before more could be said, the glass doors swung open. 4 individuals in dark suits, federal credentials clipped to their jackets, entered with an air of undeniable authority. The tallest, a woman, stepped forward. "Branch Manager Gerald Price?" Her voice was calm, cutting. He straightened. "Yes?" "Special Agent Rivera, Office of the Inspector General, U.S. Treasury." She flashed a badge. "This is Agent Moss, Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. We are conducting an emergency audit of this branch. Effective immediately." Gerald blanched. "Wait, what?" Rivera didn't blink. "We've been alerted to the unauthorized destruction of a government-issued payment to a veteran. This qualifies as a priority federal investigation." Behind her, agents fanned out. One headed for the surveillance server, another towards the teller line. Agent Moss fixed Lindsay with an unwavering gaze. "You are Lindsay Foster?" She nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. "You'll come with me." Lindsay looked pleadingly at her manager. "I didn't do anything illegal." "That," Agent Moss stated, "is what we are here to determine." Across the street, Hull watched as 2 unmarked sedans with government plates pulled up. A man emerged from the first, not in a suit, but in slacks and a windbreaker bearing a discreet Treasury Department seal. Tall, graying at the temples, with sharp, assessing eyes, James Colton, Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Treasury. He spotted Hull and crossed the street. No handshake was needed. "You okay, Ray?" Colton asked. Ray nodded. "They moved fast." "I made one call," Colton said, sitting beside him, a comfortable distance for men who had shared the crucible of war. "Still remember that day outside Basra?" Colton said softly. "The convo, the RPG. Your voice calling out through the smoke. You were just a kid then. You're the reason I made it out." They sat in shared silence for a moment. "You didn't have to come yourself," Ray said. Colton glanced at him. "Yes, Ray. I did." He paused. "You're not the only one they treat this way. Like we're obsolete, disposable. Like our service ended the day we took off the uniform." He shook his head. "Not on my watch." Raymond's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Colton stood. "I'll be back. We're going to make this right." He turned and walked into the bank, a man with nothing to prove and everything to uphold. Inside, Lindsay sat in a small room, Agent Moss across from her, a digital recorder on the table. "Ms. Foster," Moss began, "are you aware that the unilateral destruction of a verified Treasury-issued check is a federal offense?" Her eyes widened. I didn't know for sure it was real. Did you attempt verification through Treasury's direct line?" "No." "Did you alert your supervisor prior to destruction?" "No." "Did you scan the QR security strip or run the cross-check serial in the central system?" Lindsay's throat was tight. "No." Agent Moss leaned forward. "You didn't follow procedure. You didn't verify. You didn't seek assistance. You assumed. And in doing so, you shredded a decorated Marine's rightful compensation. That kind of assumption ends careers." As James Colton entered, Gerald Price rushed forward. "Sir! Deputy Secretary Colton! I had no idea, save it." Colton cut him off, his voice glacial. "Where is the check shredder log?" Gerald stammered. "Every unit logs timestamped usage. We'll pull it, along with your surveillance. Then, we will discuss staff retraining, internal oversight, and precisely why a man who served this country with honor was treated like a common criminal in your establishment." Colton's voice, though not loud, filled the suddenly cavernous bank lobby. "Let me be unequivocally clear," he began, his gaze sweeping over the frozen staff. "When you shred a U.S. Treasury check issued to a retired Marine, you are not protecting the system. You are breaking it." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You are not preventing fraud. You are telling a decorated veteran, a man who fought, who bled, who waited patiently for his government to honor its commitment, that he is insignificant, that his sacrifice is meaningless. His voice deepened. Today, this branch didn't just mishandle a check. You mishandled a man, a soldier, a citizen. Worse, you mishandled his dignity. This is no longer about bank policy. This is about accountability. He nodded to Agent Rivera. Complete the audit. And with that, he walked out. Hull stood as Colton approached. You didn't have to do all that, he said quietly. Yes, Ray, Colton replied, placing a hand briefly on Hull's shoulder. I did. The next morning, Hull's flip phone rang. JC, again. Ray, Colton's voice was gentler. It's done. Full compensation direct deposited. Verified, logged, expedited. You should see it now. A quiet, thank you, was Hull's reply. There's more, Colton added. An official letter of apology from the Treasury and a supplemental support grant. Consider it overdue recognition. Raymond paused. I didn't ask for any of that. I know, Colton said. That's precisely why you're getting it. I'm proud to know you, Ray. Always have been. The call ended. The money was necessary. But the call? That was respect. That was closure. By week's end, Lindsay Foster was suspended, pending multiple inquiries. Gerald Price testified before a compliance board and left without his title. The bank's policy manuals were rewritten, a new line added to the first page. Service is not merely transactional, it is personal and often sacred. A few days later, a hand-delivered letter invited Mr. Raymond Hull as guest of honor at the Brookdale Veterans Recognition Ceremony. It spoke of dignity, sacrifice, and perseverance. Hull read it, folded it, and placed it in a drawer with his discharge papers. He didn't need a podium. He did, however, go to the diner that afternoon. When the waitress brought his bill for coffee and pie, she smiled. It's already been taken care of, sir. Word had spread. A nod from a mechanic. A door held open at the post office. Thank you, sir, from the kid at the grocery store. No headlines, just a quiet recalibration of respect. Arthur Jennings, the night security guard at Cedar River Credit Union, saw it all. I watched Hull, he'd later say. The way he stood there, not flinching. Like he'd seen far worse, yet still dared to hope for better. Justice didn't arrive with trumpets. It came with a phone call, with agents crossing a lobby, with a deputy secretary saying what needed to be said. When you disrespect a soldier's due, you sever a thread of trust this nation depends on. You don't need medals pinned to your chest to command respect. You don't need parades to validate your worth. Sometimes, all it takes is one quiet man, one steady gaze, and a story the world almost forgot to listen to. Raymond Hull never asked for the spotlight. He asked for what he had earned. And when the system faltered, he didn't raise his voice. He made a call, and the system remembered. It was a lesson for all. Never underestimate the quiet ones, the steadfast souls whose history you may never fully comprehend. Their strength is not in volume, but in unwavering integrity. In our most challenging moments, courage and dignity often reside in the quietest hearts. Their stories remind us that true strength isn't about shouting the loudest, but standing firm for what is right, even when no one seems to be watching. Because eventually, the world does notice. Share these stories of unbreakable spirit. For when we honor quiet heroism, we strengthen the heart of humanity.